big hit in Britain's Got Talent. He had the nerve to bring on a W. Simon Cowell. Or was it the real thing? How can you tell? It led to our guest in 6 short years becoming today only ventriloquist. His own show, packing theatres all over the country. He is the partner of Arthur Larga and our very own water rat, Steve Ewan.
Welcome to Eyes and Teeth, the specials, celebrating the wonderful Roy Hudd OBE. I first met Roy Hudd when I was hosting the Thursford Christmas Spectacular in Norfolk. The show is the biggest variety show in the UK and boasts West End performers and first-class musicians, vocalists, dancers and variety acts. Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber says of his many auditionees at his shows, if they're good enough for Thursford, then they're good enough for me. So expect to see me and Chi-Chi in the next run of Cats in the West End soon. I'm just kidding, of course, it wouldn't work. Chi-Chi's a dog. At the interval in 2010, my name came over the tannoy backstage to all dressing rooms, announcing someone wanted to meet me by the carousel. There stood John Cushion, the producer of Thursford, with Roy and Debbie Hudd. And after the intro was out of the way, the first thing Roy said to me was, "There's a wonderful song you could do with that last puppet you used." And he continued to sing a tune and pass on his generosity and wisdom to a very young ventriloquist act-ish. I was 34. But in total awe of meeting possibly the last of the musical legends, who was there at the tail end meeting Max Miller at the stage door. I knew this man from the successful Hudlines radio series. I knew him from Coronation Street and countless TV appearances and books. I had previously written to Roy to purchase his own books via the British Musical Society Quarterly magazine, which he sold and signed and posted himself. I knew I was in the presence of variety royalty, and was grateful that only after 2 minutes he was already giving me ideas. It was then only 2 years later Roy Hudd and I found ourselves on the bill of the good old days at Leeds City Varieties. We spent the weekend chatting and laughing, and by the end of it he told me I would make a perfect water rat. Within 2 years Roy proposed me into the show business charity order, alongside my secondary ventriloquist Roger de Courcy, and at that time our king rat Rick Wakeman. These giants of show business welcomed me with open arms and treated me like one of the lads. Shy as I am in social situations in person, I couldn't believe I was following in the footsteps of not only ventriloquists Arthur Prince, Peter Brough, John Bouchier, Arthur Worsley, Keith Harris, but also Lauren Hardy, Sir Charles Chaplin, Danny Kaye, Sir Ken Dodd, Les Dawson, Tommy Cooper, Frankie Vaughan, and the list goes on. I finally felt wanted in the business, respected and admired, and Roy Hudd made it all happen. On my proposal night into the Rats in July 2014, Nina and I entered the Water Rats pub to be greeted by friends Adja Brown, Sean Rollo Rollison, Tommy Rollison, Andrew Van Buren, and so many more I already knew and had the support of. It was like I was winning an award to be surrounded by friends. It is even to this day an honour to be a water rat, and this year I celebrate my 10th year. I've only proposed 3 rats in my time, one being TV prankster and comedy actor Ross Lee, TV magician and funny man Mark Shortland, and superstar legend Jimmy Osmond. They were also special nights to remember. Today we pay tribute to Roy Hudd and hear from his lovely wife Debbie and friends and colleagues who equally admire his wonderful talents.
Wanted papering and Pa said it was waste to call a paper hanger in, and so he made some paste. He bought some rolls of paper, got a ladder and a brush, and with me mother's nightie on it, he made a rush. When Father papered the parlour, you couldn't see far for paste. Dabbing it here, dabbing it there, paste and paper everywhere. Mother was stuck to the ceiling, the kids were stuck to the floor. I never knew a blooming family so stuck up in roses with its leaves red, white and brown. He stuck it wrong way up and now we all walk upside down. And when he trimmed the edging off the paper with the shears, the cat got underneath it and cut off both its ears. When father favoured the parlour, you couldn't see far for pence. Dabbing it here, dabbing it there, paste and paper everywhere. Mother was stuck to the ceiling, the kids were stuck to the floor. I never knew a blooming family so stuck up before. Dear, what can the matter be? Oh, dear, what can the matter be? I works just like a good one, and I isn't over strong, and I'm mostly on me trotters all the time. So I'm glad when Easter Monday or a Whitsun comes along, 'cause a day of perfect rest is really prime. So I lately took it easy 'cause I had a day to spare, with the wife and kiddies in their Sunday clothes. It was a treat to make me mind up for a bit of country air and the pleasures of a quiet day's repose. There was me and the missus and the half a dozen kids, starting in the morning for the zoo. 'Twas a precious way to go, but we'd made our minds, you know, and we took the lot to Epping Forest too. Highgate, Barnet, Hampstead, Peckham Rye, at the Crystal Palace made a stay. We got weary on our pins, and we lost the blooming twins. Still I'm glad we had a nice quiet day. There was me and the missus and the half a dozen kids, with nothing in the bottle but the bun. Still I gave the kids a treat when we got to Newgate Street, 'cause I showed them where their uncle he was hung. West Ham, Wanstead, Woolwich, Walthamstow, we reached a spot they call St Mary's Cray. And then I says to Ma, now we mustn't go too far, 'cause I think we've had a nice quiet day. Lightning, thunder, hailing cats and dogs, water streaming off me all the way. And to finish up the night, well, the missus has a fight. Still I'm glad we had a nice quiet day.
Ice and Teeth. Roy Hudd, Debbie and I went on to work many variety shows together, whether it was for the British Musical Society, celebrating 50 years at Wilton's Music Hall, celebrating 200 years of a theatre, opening his village fete, the Water Rats charity, or celebrating Sir Ken Dodd's 90th birthday. If Roy called, I was there. He gave me so much time and was forever sending me things in the post for my future book Ventriloquist, which is nearer than ever, by the way. I am forever grateful to have worked the same stage as this wonderful and kind man. Let's listen to some of his brilliant work.
Now, this hat only reminds me of one song, and that song is Mary from the Dairy, because this hat actually belonged to the late, great Max Miller. Now, he sang lots of songs, but he was better known for this. Now, here's a funny thing, lady. Now, here is a funny thing. I went home last night. Now, there is a funny thing. And I only went out to tell my brother about my new job, because I'm driving a lorry now, and I like it. And I took my girlfriend out in a cab the other week, and we're driving up the A3. We've only been going about 3 hours. And I said, well, right, then what about it, love? She said, what are you talking about? I said, you know, a bit of the old grunt. She said, pardon? I said, you know, a bit of a kiss and cuddle. She said, what, here, going up the A3? I said, no, we'll stop first. So we stopped, and she said, now what are we going to do? I said, well, I'll tell you what, let's get out of the cab, underneath the lorry, and no one will disturb us. She's as mad as a hatter. She said, all right. Out we get, underneath the lorry. We've been there about 20 minutes. Everything's going very well. Suddenly I felt a tap on the ankle. I turned, there's a copper there. He said, hello, what's going on here? I said, it's all right, officer. I'm just adjusting my clutch. He said, well, while you're about it, I should adjust your brakes as well. Your lorry's 25 yards down the road. This hat, ladies and gentlemen, is one I'm very familiar with, because I wear this hat practically every night at the Festival Theatre Chichester, where I have the great joy of playing Bud Flanagan in a musical about Flanagan and Allen. Christopher Timothy plays Chesney Allen, and this is the title song. Underneath the arches We dream our dreams away underneath the arches, on cobblestones we lay. Every night you'll find us tired out and worn, happy when the daylight comes creeping, heralding the dawn, sleeping when it's raining, and sleeping when it's fine. Trains rattling by, pavement is a hero, no matter where you stray. Underneath the arches, we dream our dreams away. Now, this last gentleman, he used to wear lots of different hats and he sang lots of different songs, but he was best known for this, George Formby.
I'm leaning on the lamppost at the corner of the street in case a certain little lady comes by. Oh me, oh my, I hope the little lady comes by. And I don't know if she'll get away, she doesn't always get away. Anyhow, I know that she'll try. Oh me, oh my, I hope the little lady comes by. There's no other girl that I'd wait for it, or this one I'd break any day for it. I don't have to ask what she's late for it. She'd never leave me flat, she's not a girl like that. Absolutely wonderful, marvelous and beautiful. Anyone can understand why. I'm leaning on this lamppost at the corner of the street. There's a certain little lady comes by. I'm leaning on this lamppost at the corner of the street. There's a certain little lady comes by.
So many have spoken about Roy on Eyes and Teeth, and I wanted to share with you their moments and personal thoughts on Roy. Welcome to Eyes and Teeth, Robert Pierce, aka Mama G. When we worked together, I remember we had a conversation about one of your idols, your inspirations, the wonderful Roy Hudd, who you obviously miss very dearly. But you spoke to me about Roy Hudd, and I told you I'd worked with him, and then you told me how much you adored him, but you'd never met him. But I know you have since.
Yes, as quite weirdly for a 13-year-old, I became obsessed with Roy Hudd because we went to see the pantomime in Plymouth and it was Mother Goose and it was him and Jack Tripp. And my dad, up to that point, really wasn't a fan of panto. And it used to get quite grumpy when we went to see them. But Roy Hudd and Jack Tripp were so funny together that I turned to him at one point and he was crying with laughter.
Oh.
And I remember thinking, I want to be able to make people feel like that. For him to turn up and not want to watch it, but then leave thinking he's just had the best time. So I started to really follow Roy Hudd's career because he was a big inspiration to me. And yes, I'd never met him when we worked together, but then he did Mother Goose at Wilton's Music Hall.
Wow, yes.
And because Mother Goose is now my favourite panto as well, being a panto dame. So I went to see it with some friends, and Wilton's and it was wonderful. And it was really nice because it was, I think, quite similar to the version I'd seen in Plymouth. I recognised some of the jokes and some of the gags they did. And I really, really was like, this is the opportunity to meet him. It's a small, intimate venue. It's not like a theatre where you can't access the actors. Like they just come and drink in the bar. But I was so nervous, because for two reasons. Because I've really admired him for a long time, So I was nervous to have that moment. But also, if he turned around and been a horrible person, I'd have been really upset. So we're really on the edge here. But I brought my copy of his autobiography with me just in case. And one of my friends knew that. And as we were walking past the bar, they just looked in and they saw that Roy Hudd was sat with a group of friends. And they just grabbed my hand and took me across. And I just stood there patiently until he turned around and was like, who's this weirdo? And then we had a really lovely chat. And I got to tell him how much that pantomime had meant to me. And we got to talk about Jack Tripp and how he'd inspired me and how them working together had inspired me. And then he signed his autobiography for me. And I actually cried.
Oh,
when I
did
left,
you?
because I was so overwhelmed.
Oh, that's lovely. What a lovely story. Fart in the Colander. It's a great biography.
Yeah.
I love the book.
It's really good. I can't see it now. It's on my bookshelf somewhere. It's a brilliant book because also he writes and performed with loads of warmth. He was a really warm performer, which I think is something that has influenced me really greatly in what I do. There was no animosity or negativity. He was really positive and his performances were really warm. And I've seen him lots of times. I saw him in farces. I saw him do his musical show. And the musical show, I especially remember, it was just him and a pianist. And he makes the audience feel like they're in his front room.
Yeah.
And he's just chatting to them. And when you're doing that, I
magic.
think, it was incredible. Every time I'm on stage, I'm like, how do I do that? What do I do?
Oh, that's nice that you take that with you. It really is.
I think it's really important as well, because a lot of performances you see, a lot of even some pantomimes, the humor gets bogged down in negativity and being snarky, and actually, in a lot of ways, the best humor and the most intelligent humor is the humor that makes you laugh because it's positive and because it's loving and because it's caring. I think when we laugh at snarky comedy, which I do enjoy, but I think we're laughing at our lowest denominator. Like, that's the easiest comedy because laughing at people is funny. But actually, when a comedian makes you laugh because they've said something loving and caring and intelligent, that's top-notch comedy.
Here is TV producer and the greatest author of variety of our generation, John Fisher. Eyes and Teeth. Talking about the wonderful Roy Hudd, I miss him dearly. He was such a wonderful performer, archivist as well of entertainment, beautiful qualities. I went to his museum and I'm now sat in a wonderful museum stroke house. It's more of a museum, and the dear owner of this museum took me upstairs and showed me around the walls. It's a cavalcade of beautiful music hall, magicians, comedians. It's wonderful. John Fisher, welcome to Eyes and Teeth. Thank you so much for your time.
Hi, Steve.
We're talking about Roy Hudd today, and Roy Hudd, for me, I first worked with him at Leeds City Varieties, and he said, "Oh, you should be a water rat, son," you know. And 2 years later, Roy Hudd made me a water rat, a very proud water rat. As you know, the history of who was a water rat before me, Tommy Cooper, Paul Daniels, and funny enough, all within these 5 specials. But what did Roy Hudd mean to you?
Roy was just about the most convivial person you could wish to meet in show business. When I wrote my book on the variety comedian, he got a sort of footnote at the end. He was new to the game and I was talking about established performers, but I always saw he was going to be carrying the torch, carrying the flame for the tradition of the stand-up, for the variety theatre in general. And I soon discovered that he came from a very special pedigree agent-wise, because he shared an agency with 2 of the biggest music hall names that ever were. One was Gracie Fields. She was looked after by Lillian Azer,
Wow.
who handed the business over to her son Morris. Stanley Holloway, who people perhaps forget, began as a music hall turn before he became a very successful top Hollywood comedy actor.
Wow.
And then they say everything goes in threes.
Yes.
And along came a little later, Roy Hudd, who was looked after by Morris. They were a pair together throughout Roy's career. Don't think they ever had a crossword between them. And I was doing research a few years after Funny Way came out on George Formby, and I called Morris and said, look, I have a feeling that Roy Hudd might have a memory or two or a view or two on George Formby. Would you allow me to write to him? Can I have his address? He said, no problem, just drop it along here. So I dropped Roy a note, and I got back, and I still have it amongst all my treasures, the long letter that Roy wrote explaining the special appeal of George Formby. It was not to do with being a great comedian, it was not to do with being a great musician, it was everything about making your audience feel that little bit healthier, that little bit happier as they walked out of the theatre.
Yeah. So his answer was more of a science to how it works, not just about his music. And
yeah. And he had this wonderful, brimming personality, did George Formby. And he accompanied this with Roy would always add on a little funny face to his letters.
Yes.
And he also made a wonderful comparison with another person who was just right up there with my top 5 or 6, Max Bygraves. Max Bygraves didn't do much as the way of a comedian or a singer, but my God, as Bernard Delphont said, if you came away from a theatre having seen a Max Bygraves show, you felt you'd had a holiday. And it was casting all your worries away. And Roy was in that tradition. Of course, he was working at a time when the opportunities for just going out there as a stand-up, as we celebrate stand-ups, was fading away.
Yes.
And he luckily had the good sense, and I'm sure Morris Azer pushed him here, to become a very accomplished actor as well. And as we know, he appeared in Coronation Street, lots of television dramas, sometimes with big billing, sometimes with low billing. He was a working pro, and I often think, though, that it was a pity he did not diversify more into musical theatre, as Stanley Holloway did,
Yes.
with My Fair Lady, because most musicals have comic numbers for light
Yes, they do.
relief.
I believe he was in Oliver. Was he in Oliver at some point?
Yes,
I believe
he played Oliver on
Yeah.
2 occasions, taking over from Ron Moody, and he also, of course, did the musical based on the life of Flanagan and Allen.
Of course,
But,
yes. Which I saw a clip on the Royal Variety performance of him doing that.
But, of course, I think of a show like Kiss Me Kate. There's a wonderful number in there called Brush Up Your Shakespeare.
All right.
And there's a great moment on a World Variety when Bruce Forsyth and Sidney James came together and did that together as a duet. Of course, Sidney James had been in the West End production of that as one of the comic relief performers.
Right.
And I would love to have seen Roy do more things like that, and
Yes.
got his tongue, if you like, his presence around comic songs in the tradition of the Great American Songbook, as well as the old musical. I did mention that, of course, he starred in the musical based on the life of Flanagan and Allen, Bud Flanagan and Chesney Allen.
Yes.
I was told that the genesis of that production was the chapter in my book about Bud and Ches and the Crazy Gang. And in fact, I owe it, in no small measure, to Chesney Allen, for the book's being published.
Really?
Because when I wrote the manuscript and I thought, am I going to get this published? Well, you send it to a publisher, don't you? So I took a pin and I put this in a list of publishers in a book called The Writers and Artists Yearbook. And one of those publishers happened to be a publisher called Frederick Muller. So I wrote to Frederick Muller, and eventually they came back to me and said, yeah, we really, really would like to publish this.
And it was only later that I discovered that Frederick Muller had also published the autobiographies of Bing Crosby, Gracie Fields, Bob Hope and Bud Flanagan.
Right.
And in the process of publishing the book on Bud Flanagan, they'd got to know Chesney Allen very well. So, unbeknown to me, they had sent my manuscript to Chesney Allen saying, should we publish this or not? We don't know really much about the subject. And he wrote back and said, you have a duty to publish this. I don't understand how young this writer can be, because I was in my mid-latish 20s. But the book was published thanks to Chesney, who agreed subsequently to write a foreword to the book. And then the years go by, and I'm working my way through a career in television, and I'm producing The Parkinson Show. And I think Roy had been a guest on a show just as himself, which it would have been when I first met him. But then we're getting a call from the people promoting Underneath the Arches, the Bernard Alfont office. And they're saying, would you be able to interview Roy again, to promote the show? Now, it so happens Michael had also done a wonderful interview with Chesney Allen. So the mind starts to work, and you think, well, couldn't we dedicate a whole show to the Crazy Gang? Okay. And we can get Chesney to actually sit down with Roy, and Christopher Timothy was playing Chesney, so he'd have a part to play.
Fascinating.
And we got permission from Bernard Alfont to use anything we wanted from the show by way of this comedy sketch or that comedy sketch. And the show was a wonderful success. Both the Parkinson Show and subsequently the West End show at the Prince of Wales Theatre.
Amazing.
And a few months went by, and I had a large envelope come through the post. It was a sort of one of these photographs, do not bend. And I opened it, and it was mounted, again, it's in amongst all my treasures, and it was a photograph of the front of the house of the Prince of Wales Theatre with the neon sign saying Roy Hudd and Christopher Timothy in Underneath the Arches. And Roy has signed it, "Dear John, thank you for putting a shilling in the meter." And they ran a year.
That's brilliant.
They probably,
so off the back of that show, that
on
interview.
the back of the Parkinson Show,
yes.
And word of mouth, of course.
It's a great idea.
And it was wonderful. So Roy and I became extra friendly on the back of that. And around the time, Roy was doing a Sunday morning radio show. I forget what it was called, the Roy Hudd Experience or an audio. It was
before the Hudlines, that was
probably simultaneously with the Hudlines.
Okay.
This was the sort of thing Paul O'Grady went on to do.
Yes.
And Roy had a very easy manner, and he wasn't talking just to celebrities. He was talking to people in the business or people with fascinating stories to tell, as well as playing records and reminiscing. And it was a 2-hour show. And I thought, there's got to be here the seed for a television show.
Yes.
Because Roy had been difficult to find a vehicle for.
Okay.
And it wasn't going to be as easy as just doing the Hudlines.
Ice and Teeth.
It was wonderful to get to know Roy and Chesney together. The show that ran in the West End, of course, began as a summer attraction at the Chichester Festival Theatre.
Okay. That's a great venue, isn't it, the festival?
Fantastic. And some of the musicals they put on there.
Yes, I saw the Morecambe and Wise show there at Christmas.
Did you?
Yeah, which is John T. Stevens and Ian Aspinall, who plays Morecambe and Wise. So about 5 years ago. Fascinating, but a great venue for that.
The show that I think was just one of the greatest things I've ever seen was a show they did 2 years back called Crazy for You, starring Charlie Stemp, and it's now on at the New London Theatre.
Is it really?
Yes, and if you want to see a great performance in a musical, get to see that before the end of the year. One of the reviews at Chichester, or was it for the West End opening, was, if you can imagine a combination of Fred Astaire and Norman Wisdom, then you've got Charlie Stemp in a nutshell. And he's absolutely brilliant. He is a star. The only thing that I worry about him is the sort of capability of promoting yourself with the musical scene as it is. Somebody's got to really take him and mould him into a show that's truly his own.
Yes.
But it's standing ovations.
Really?
Literally standing
So that
ovations.
show's made for him, really, but he needs something else now to springboard him into
and
stardom.
his dancing skills,
yes,
his comedy skills are wonderful. And I'll mention his name again in a minute because there's something else I want to say about Roy. I was last with Roy at the annual cabaret dinner of the Max Miller Appreciation Society, of which he was the president. And he came along. Nobody had seen him for 2 or 3 years.
yes,
And he was, as we all have to become, a bit of a shadow of his former self. He'd lost his agility and relying very much on Debbie, obviously, to look after him. But he got up and he gave a speech, put in a few tried and tested surefire gags, and then apologised but explained that he was going to have to give up the presidency, and he begged leave of the gathering to be excused early, and Debbie walked him with some others to his car, and I thought, well, I've got to just say hopefully not goodbye,
yes.
but I managed to stop them en route, and it was wonderful. We'd been at the table together,
Okay.
but I just wanted to say a few personal things to him. And Debbie said, you know, we've really got to organise an opportunity for you two to get together in more relaxed circumstances. So we had our exchange of Christmas cards, and then before we could set anything up for me to visit him or whatever, he had passed away.
Oh, that was in 2020, wasn't it?
It was then the greatest honour and a shock of my life to be invited to take over the presidency of the society
yes.
from him.
That's incredible, because when I was, like I said, at the City Varieties, Roy Hudd was dressed up as Max Miller. I was standing in the wings watching him in the spotlight doing Max Miller as well as he did. It was wonderful, and he adored Max. And to be within the society as a patron and you now as president, it's a lovely connection, you know. There's just always this connection in show business.
It's a family circle.
Yeah, well, it always comes round, doesn't it, you know?
I last saw Roy work about, I suppose it's 5 years ago now, because we tend to gloss over the lockdown period, which we shouldn't, and he'd vowed several years back that he was never going to do pantomime again. He was disenchanted with a lot of what was going on in Panto, I guess with the managements perhaps who he thought didn't understand it as much as he did. And did he understand pantomime? Yes. And as you know, he wrote many original scripts which Debbie would then direct, and he did that memorable production at Sadler's Wells with Jack Tripp.
Right, yes.
The greatest of all the dames, give or take Arthur Askey and Les Dawson.
Yes.
And suddenly it's hitting the pages of the press that Roy Hudd's going to do pantomime again.
Was that Mother Goose?
Yes, it was Mother Goose at Wilson's Music Hall.
Yes.
And I think the opportunity of playing Wilson's to a commercial audience was an offer he couldn't refuse, and they also allowed him, or maybe they'd asked him, would he be able to base his characterisation as much as anything on the original Mother Goose, who was Dan Leno. And many, many years ago, and one of my first introductions to Roy Hudd was a radio programme he made on Dan Leno. It was within a series called Contrasts. I think it was radio, it might have been television. It might be worth a bit of research. And it was Roy talking about Leno, and also the book that was just being republished, Dan Leno, his book, which he had re-edited. Have you seen that?
No.
It was a little book. It was a little book that came out in Dan Leno's lifetime.
Wow.
It was obviously a bestseller.
Yeah.
We're
So
talking
he had
about,
his own
talking
saying.
about 120, 30 years ago. And Roy thought this would be great. And they republished it with an introduction from Roy. And the radio or television show was based on that.
Okay.
That was one of my first introductions to Roy. The other was on a satirical show produced by Ned Sherrin. The successor to That Was the Week That Was,
Okay.
which was not so much a programme, more a way of life.
Yes.
And when eventually he was given a radio show called The News Headlines, which delved away from musical into a more satirical take of the comedy happening around us as we speak,
Yes.
perhaps it was perfect casting to those who remembered him
No, it's
from
brilliant.
the work he'd done with Ned Sherrin.
Yes, and he, you know, went from music hall to radio to musicals, pantomime. He did everything, really, didn't he? Because I believe he left the Hudlines to join Coronation Street, so he went back into acting, and then he came back to do pantomime. So I guess it's always in your blood, isn't it? Music hall and variety.
Yes.
You have to come back to that at some point.
Yes, yeah. But his portrayal of Mother Goose was visually stunning.
Did you see it?
Yes.
Oh wow.
And
Sad little
he'd got the costume exactly as you see it in all the old postcards depicting Dan Leno. And the face, there was something about it. And next door in that room there, for Sewer City, I've got a painting of Dan Leno, and I'll allow you to take a grab of it, because
great.
it's one of my proudest things, and I never got the opportunity to share that with Roy, which is a great regret, because he was a wonderful man, and really deserved a lot more success, higher and higher and higher up the ladder. You see, the only time he topped the bill in the West End was when he did that.
Yes.
Bud Flanagan show, with one exception. There was a play called When We Are Married, a farce by J.B. Priestley,
Right.
and that was dramatised. The plum part is the part of the comic photographer who bumbles his way into this wedding reception of all these people getting married or getting married again. It's a bit complex plot, and it was like, didn't really have any meaning on the plot, but they allowed this comic turn to dominate the action for 20 minutes.
Oh wow.
And the person who originated that, there was a comedian called Sidney Howard, big review star, then Fred Emley, that gargantuan girth with the slightly upper class. I showed you a
Yes.
caricature of him. And then, although he was not in that mould, they gave it to Roy, and he did brilliantly in that. Whether there are any clips of that, well, you're not doing this for videos, so when I start mentioning clips, I think
Yeah,
of
it'd be more of an audio.
it
I'd
would
give
be
it
an
a little
audio,
maybe.
probably, yeah.
Yeah.
But if you wanted it, actually, the place where you'd easily get audio, it would be a lot of work, would be the Theatre Museum, because they keep video recordings
Oh, okay.
of all the all West End shows, at least were, not for commercial use, just purely as a record.
Okay.
So, you know, if you were doing this for television, it would sit uneasily. But if you're looking for just the voice of him doing it. But I think, when I think back to Dan Leno, that he'd have been very proud of what Roy Hudd did for his memory, just as you and I are proud for what he did for Max Miller's memory.
Yes, of course, he paid wonderful tributes.
He really was the flag waver for the great tradition of the variety comedian, and show business should be very grateful to him for that.
Now, I wonder how many of you remember this one. One of my favourites. There's a famous seaside place called Blackpool that is noted for fresh air and fun. And Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom went there with young Albert, their son. A grand little lad was young Albert, all dressed in his best, quite a swell, with a stick with an horse's head handle, the finest that Woolworths could sell. They didn't think much to the ocean. The waves, they was fiddling and small. There was no wrecks and nobody drowned. In fact, nothing to laugh at all. So, seeking for further amusement, they paid and went into the zoo, where they'd lions and tigers and camels, and old ale and sandwiches too. There were one great big lion called Wallace. His nose were all covered with scars. He lay in a somnolent posture, with his face on the side of the bars. Now, Albert had heard about lions, how they was ferocious and wild. To see Wallace lying so peaceful, well, it didn't seem right to the child. So straightway, the brave little fella, not showing a morsel of fear, took his stick with the horse's head handle and pushed it in Wallace's ear. You could see that the lion didn't like it. For giving a kind of a roll, he pulled Albert inside the cage with him and swallowed the little lad whole. Then Pa, who had seen the occurrence and didn't know what to do next, said, "Mother, yon lion's at Albert." And Mother said, "Well, I am vexed." Now, Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom, quite rightly, when all's said and done, complained to the animal keeper that the lion had eaten their son. The keeper was quite nice about it. He said, "What a nasty mishap. Are you sure it's your boy he's eaten?" Pa said, "Am I sure? There's his cap." The manager had to be sent for. He came and said, "What's to do?" Pa said, "Yon lion's at Albert, and him in his Sunday clothes too." Then Mother said, "Right's right, young fella. I think it's a shame and a sin for a lion to go and eat Albert, and after we've paid to come in." The manager wanted no trouble. He took out his purse right away, saying how much to settle the matter. And Pa said, "What do you usually pay?" But Mother had turned a bit awkward when she thought where her Albert had gone. She said, "No, someone's got to be summoned." So that was decided upon. Then off they went to the police station, in front of the magistrate chap, and they told him what happened to Albert, and proved it by showing his cap. The magistrate gave his opinion that no one was really to blame, and he said that he hoped the Ramsbottoms would have further sons to their name. At that, Mother got proper blazing. "And thank you so kindly," said she. "What, waste all our lives raising children to feed ruddy lions? Not me."
I owe eternal gratitude to John Fisher, who has been an incredible help to me with this podcast and with Ventriloquist, the future book. I last saw Roy Hudd at Sir Ken Dodd's 90th birthday party in celebration with the British Musical Society in London. Roy agreed I could perform. I had made up, thanks to Peter Pullen, a dummy made up of Ken Dodd himself. It was a secret that Lady Anne kept secret for me until the day. I'll tell you more about that occasion in another podcast in these specials, but there was a lovely moment that Roy Hudd and Barry Cryer, another Water Rat Sally, no longer with us, but they shared a tune on stage for Doddy, and it went like this.
And we're going to start with a song from us two. Myself and Mr. Barry Cryer, to whom we will raise our hands. There we go. And it's us two, the Burke and Hare of lyricists. Here we are. With the very deepest and heartfelt apologies to someone who we taught everything he knows, Cole Porter. I used to praise, with fancy phrase, the golden days when terms were sung. But now they say our clowns of today, all cliche and not funny. But that ain't exactly true. 'Cause here's one, and here's a clue. Hair quite unique, and teeth oblique. Eccentricity he does embody. He's not quite as fit as handsome Brad Pitt, but my heart belongs to Dolly. He'll give them lots of smile. Oh yes, piles. Do some very odd parts of your body. You'll watch him for hours and hours and hours. He won't let you depart, cruel Doddy. Still my heart belongs to Daddy, or even Dolly. I got vowel disorder. Again, same old problem. 'Cause he loves it out there on his Todd. He's still at it at 90 as Doddy. Why he does it, don't know, silly son. But a friend of his who is truly devout helps him keep his foot on the pedal. Our Annie, he just can't do without. She deserves a bloody medal. Where'er you're from, to each dad and mom, from Coventry to Kirkcaldy, theatres all shout, sorry, sold out, no seat in any part for Doddy. He'll never blaspheme, and he sings like a dream. He's a positive scouse, Pavarotti. Thank you. Bags some jokes by the score. And then lots and lots more. All parts of the whole that is Doddy. Yes, our hearts belong to Doddy, and you may think that that's rather odd. Both our hearts belong to Daddy, devastatedly diddy-dod. Now we ask you, everybody, is us loving a comic incest? Why do our hearts belong to Doddy? 'Cause Sir Ken is quite simply the best. I'm here to tell you why we did it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the one who wrote all the best lines.
No, you lie. He wrote that song.
Roy and I had a mutual friend in Mike Craig, producer and writer for Morecambe and Wise. I spent 5 weeks with Mike Craig on a cruise ship. Can you imagine Mike Craig and Roy Hudd together? must have made for just hours and hours of entertainment and interviews. This is a lovely conversation with Roy Hudd in conversation with Mike Craig for the Radio 2 series It's a Funny Business, shared from YouTube and random radio jot-ins.
You see, I was very lucky. I mean, and I think I was very lucky that I wasn't brought up by my mum and dad. My gran brought me up. And I think anyone who's lucky enough to be brought up by an older person is a very lucky person indeed, because you get a lot of experience and they've got much better senses of humour. They're not too caught up with trying to carve out anything for themselves.
Yeah, more time to spend with you.
Right, yeah. Right. You know, it's a lot of fun to be with an older person, I've always found. My gran brought me up, and she brought the pair of us up on an old age pension, £2.17 and 9p it was then. But always out of this, she managed to get 2 bob out of whatever money we had in that week to go to the Croydon Empire, the old Croydon Empire. And we always used to go on Tuesday because it was carnival night on Tuesdays. About free balloons used to come down and all this. There was a chance we might get one. So off we used to go every Tuesday to the Croydon Empire. And my gran was a very, very funny woman, a lovely woman she was. We used to go up to the gallery, and the gallery up at the Croydon Empire was great big stone steps that you sat on, no seats or benches or anything, just hewn out of like the solid rock. And on the front of these steps was whitewash. I don't know why, but there was whitewash there. And we used to see and watch the show. And then as we used to come down the stairs, just before we used to go into the street, my gran used to say, now turn round. And she used to get a handkerchief out and spit on a handkerchief. And she used to rub the whitewash off the back of my shoes because she said, I don't want people thinking I can only afford to go up in the gallery. Oh. Lovely, isn't it? Now, you may have noticed, Mike, there's that big picture of Max Miller there. Well, he was one of my great heroes of my life. You know, in fact, I named my son after him, Max. One story connected with Max, actually, we worked with him at the Finsbury Park Empire, practically his last date.
You say we, Roy?
Well, I was doing a double act at the time with a chap called Eddie Kay, and we were together about a year. And one of our earliest dates was at the Finsbury Park Empire, and Max Miller was topping the bill. It was a fantastic bill, actually, to be on. It was Max Miller, G.H. Eliot, Hetty King, Audrey Jeans, and 1 or 2 other bits and pieces.
It's the bill that's on the wall over there.
The very one, yeah. My favourite bill, it really is the one. And Max was very, very kind to us, and about the Wednesday he sort of said hello. And he took us in the dressing room and had a little chat with us, and the nice parts he thought about our act and where we were going on. He'd actually taken the trouble to come down and watch it, Max. And we must have sort of appealed to him in some way or another, because he said to us, now look, boys, he said, come up, he said, second house, he said, come up, he said, to the bar and I'll buy you a drink. Well, there was a long silence followed this, because, I mean, one of the great things about Max was he'd never, ever been known in the history of his career to ever buy anybody a drink, ever. So we rushed around and told all the stagehands, Max is going to buy us a drink. Max said, no, get out of it. They said, you know, what are you talking about, you know. So anyway, we were very thrilled because he'd actually asked us up for a drink. So up we go up to the bar, and it's in the first half, we've done our act, and Max is on in the second half, so we go up to the bar and we sit down there in the corner. Nothing happens, nothing at all. We all go and sit in the corner. And so after about sort of 10 minutes of this fencing about, you know, I couldn't stand it any longer, you know, so I said, reached my hand in my pocket, we've got about 15 bob between us, and I said, well, what will you have, Mr. Miller? Look, sit down there, son. He said, just stay there and be patient, will you? He starts talking for another 10 minutes, nothing happens. Eddie tries to get up and buy him a drink, he doesn't want to know about that at all. Then suddenly it's the interval, and the doors open of the bar, and all the punters come in from the audience. The whole audience come in, and they see him in the corner. God, blimey, they said, there he is, there's old Max. Max, what will you have? He said, I'll have a large gin and tonic. What will you have, Roy? What will you have, Eddie? He'd sat there waiting for 20 minutes for the punters to come in and buy him a drink.
Ice and Teeth.
I started doing amateur shows at the Boys Club, and then I went into the RAF, and we did amateur shows in the RAF. And then after that, we went into Butlins as Redcoats, myself and my partner.
Yes.
Well, it was quite a funny story connected with that, actually, because we thought, now, how can we get into show business? After I come out of the RAF, we wanted to get into show business. Now, at this time, they had a place for the forces just off St Martin's Lane there called the Nuffield Centre.
Right.
Which was a place where you could go, you know, if you were in town, any forces could go there, and you could get a meal, you could have a little bit of a dance set, something like that, get free theatre tickets and things like this. So they always had a concert on Tuesday evenings at the Nuffield Centre for the forces, and they used to have turns there, but it was quite a good showcase in those days, because at the back of the little theatre there, they had a gallery which seated about 8 people, and you used to get 8 agents used to come. I always remember Izzy Bond used to be there a lot.
Yes.
And they used to come and watch the turns, and if they liked them, they'd come down and try and get them some work or something like this. So we wrote to the Nuffield Centre, and we were calling ourselves DeHaven and Williamson or something. We decided to disguise our names. We had such a rotten actor out to disguise, you know. We wrote there for one of these shows. So the woman wrote back and she said, yeah, sure. She said, what are your professional engagements? You know, and we wrote actually back explaining that we were amateurs and they didn't want to know. You had to be a professional before you could work there. So we rapidly decided to change our names to Hudd and Kay, which we did, and had some other letterheads printed, and wrote back and gave her this great long list of professional engagements we'd done. We'd never done anything in our lives. So we do this show, and just fresh out of the RAF, you can imagine, we went like a bomb with the service audiences because we knew all the service gags, you see. Yeah. We went very well, and so we're sitting in the dressing room afterwards, we're very pleased with ourselves. And this chap comes round and he said, boys, he said, I saw the act. He said, I was very impressed with it. He said, do you fancy coming to work for Butlins this summer? So we said, well, not half, great. You know, so he said, well, come out to the office tomorrow morning, we'll see. So we go up to Butlins' office in Oxford Street and we're going to see this chap, Frank Mansell. He's still in the business now, does a lot of bits and pieces. So we go in to see Frank and he says, oh, fine, boys, sign the contract. You know, so we can't sign the contract and we're all set. 26 weeks at Clacton for Butlins. We think this is it. What experience. We're going to make it. So we get there, and the first thing we get when we get in the gates, the fella says, right, come over here, you two, sit down there, hold that number in front of you, hold a number in front of us, and we get our photos taken for the identity cards. She's like prison. So the next thing is we go to see the entertainment manager, and I said, well, when do we do our first show? He said, what do you mean, shows? I said, well, you know, we're entertainers. We're coming to entertain. He said, you're not your bloody redcoats, mate. He said, you'll get out there and graft like the rest of them. We'd actually signed these contracts. We didn't realise it wasn't for shows at all. It was for redcoat duties, which were sort of marking out football pitches, taking the kids for walks, dancing with the old ugly birds that no one would dance with and all this. And we did occasionally about one show a week.
I know everything about it is appealing. Everything the traffic will allow. Nowhere could you have that happy feeling when you are stealing that extra bow.
Here's Roy making a guest appearance on the Alan Titchmarsh Daytime Show, talking about a wonderful meeting with Cary Grant.
This one's my grand, that's what I want to know.
She's in. The book is full of wonderful, wonderful stories that made me laugh. I was stuck in traffic this morning. I was reading it. I was rather glad I was stuck. They're great stories, including the one which you've got to tell them about Cary Grant.
Oh, that was a hell of a story, that was,
Roy Hudd and Cary Grant, not two names that you also can associate with one another.
Well, we work very similarly, but apart from that, you know, we were doing, I was doing a panto in Bristol, and I used to have a room in this hotel. I go home at weekends, come back Monday, you know, for the matinee and everything. So I came back this Monday, and I go into the hotel there and to get a cab down to the theatre, you see, and there's a big cake on the reception desk, and it said, welcome back to Bristol. And I said, oh, God, you shouldn't bother. I've only been away a day, you know. And they says, not for you. I said, who's it for? And they said, him. And they pointed to in the bar, and there, God is my judge, was Cary Grant standing there. Now, Cary Grant came from Bristol, of course, you see.
Archie Leach.
That's right. So it was a stilt walker originally.
Is it really?
Yeah.
No.
So anyway, I go, I can't believe it. You know, one of my heroes, a great man of, you know, throwaway comedy, absolutely terrific. So I go through there, and I said, you don't know me at all, Mr. Grant, but I just want to say thank you very much for all the entertainment. He said, I do know you. He said, you're Roy Hudd and you're here in the pantomime. I said, yeah. He said, I always go to see the pantomime every time I come over, you know. And he said, it's my birthday today. He said, will you have a snort with me? Will you have a snort with me? So I said, yeah, snort with Cary, you know what I mean? It was great. So I didn't know what posh film stars spoke, so I said, could I have a scotch on the rocks? I'd never drunk anything like it in my life, you know. So they gave me this whiskey, and that was great and everything. He said, I'm coming to see the pantomime tonight, he said, with some friends, and I'll see you down there. Oh, fantastic, you know, so I can't believe it. So I go running down the theatre of the matinee in the hour. Peter Noon was the star of Herman and the Hermits. Yeah. So we get there, and I can't wait to tell everybody. I've only bumped into Cary, haven't I? You know. So we go down there, and I think on my way down, I thought, no, there's a better way. I can get away with this. It's better. Much better than telling them, you see. So I get there, and then Peter comes down between two shows and said, you know that you'll never guess who's coming back to see the show tonight. I said, I'm getting ready to go out now. I said, oh, who's that then? He said, Cary Grant. I said, oh, really? I said, I know him. He said, of course you do, of course you do. He said, well, if you fancy a drink, he said, we're all going to have a drink in my dressing room. Fine. So it gets to the end of the show, and I hear Carrie's party and all that arrive. So that, and all the girls are coming running down the stairs. They can't wait to meet Carrie, you know. And I'm waiting till they're all in the room, right? So they're all in Peter's room, and I stroll along to the room, you see, open the door, and there's Cary Grant sat there, all the girls listening to every word he's got to say. And as I walked in, he said, hi, Roy. I said, hi, Cary. It was just the greatest thing that's ever happened to me ever, you know.
Roy and Debbie invited me to open their summer fete. I stayed over the night before. We enjoyed some wine, some wonderful dinner. I mean, Debbie was just the most beautiful host. And Roy astounded me with his memorabilia galore in his museum of extravaganza. It was incredible. You could tell I was the happiest ventriloquist alive, just sitting there listening to his stories direct, not from a book, from his own mouth. Roy and Debbie really looked after me that day. So I left them a couple of my mugs for my merchandise that year. Here's my conversation with the beautiful Debbie Hudd. Oh, bless you. How are you, Debbie?
Very well, thanks, Steve. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Very good. And
You're looking good.
Yeah, thank you. I don't normally wear these, but I've got writing to read.
Look, I got them too.
Oh, bless.
And
I actually...
I'm having a cup of tea.
You know, that was in a raffle. I'm sure Roy won that in a raffle.
Well, we've got two. We had one each.
I think I dropped those off actually when I come to stay. So I think I left you some Arthur mugs.
That's right.
Nice to know they're being used. Thank you for that.
Definitely.
I actually saw two on Gogglebox once because one of the Gogglebox, Scarlett Moffat, come to see me in Darlington, and they said, "Oh, we'll buy some mugs." I said, "No, don't buy them. You can have them. Thanks for coming."
Yes.
And then she said, "We'll use them on the show." And then 4 weeks later, they was drinking out their Arthur Lager and Chi Chi mugs.
I love Gogglebox.
Oh, we do. It's a great giggle, isn't it? It's strange because artists work so hard to write material and act and learn their lines for a show. But Gogglebox, it's not an easy thing to say for a ventriloquist, but Gogglebox is one of the easiest scripted shows in the world because it's all ad lib, isn't it? It works.
Absolutely. Yes.
Did Roy enjoy that? Did Roy enjoy that sort of show?
He wasn't into reality shows.
No.
At all. But he said he did watch it a few times and he did have a little giggle now and again. Yes. So he was sort of on the quiet, quite enjoyed it.
Yes. Oh, bless him. Funny is funny, I guess. And Debbie Flitcroft, Debbie Hudd, thank you so much for being here today. You've always been there when I met Roy. When I first met Roy, it was actually at the Thursford Christmas Spectacular show that I was hosting. Yeah. Were you there at that day?
Yes.
You were there. So please forgive me. I couldn't remember if I knew there was.
I'll tell you what. When people first meet Roy, he's such a big personality. I can understand people don't always remember who he's with. We went there a few years. It's a fabulous show, and he couldn't get there without me because Roy couldn't drive.
Of course, yes, and you have to drive to get to Thursford because it's in the middle of nowhere in Norfolk, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. The first time we went, we were driving down and following the sat nav, and Roy said, "This can't be right, Debbie. It's like down a dirt track in the side of a field."
Isn't it amazing though? Because once you get there, it's like the London Palladium, isn't it? It was just a wonderful experience.
It's bigger. It's more like Las Vegas.
It
really
is
than the London Palladium, because you are surrounded, literally surrounded by lights and beautiful things. It's so tastefully done.
Yes, it's Christmas.
When I've described it to people, I said, it sounds, when I've sort of said hanging from the ceilings, there's these great big hot air balloons with big teddy bears hanging out and stuff.
Wurlitzers.
I said, yeah, Wurlitzers. I said, but it might sound awful, but it isn't. It's so beautifully done. It really is. It's really classy. And classy acts on there as well.
Oh, bless you. Yes, I've hosted it for 4 years and I've loved it. It's one of the most greatest things. But before I met Roy on that occasion, I I used to write to the back of the British Musical Society. They had a magazine, and
Yeah.
Roy would advertise memorabilia and books that he was selling
That's
on
right.
Musical. A wonderful author as he was. I've still got them here, and he always signed them himself. So I thought this was somebody that worked in an office that works for Roy. He did it all himself, Debbie.
Oh, yes.
He signed
Oh,
all
you
the
could.
books. I was delighted.
Very
when they turned up.
difficult to do Roy's handwriting.
Yeah.
Believe me, I've tried.
It's just a lovely, it's not a squiggle, it's just a really unique way he wrote his name. This is one of those instances, where I would get a postcard from Roy for my book, and he always was thinking about me writing my book on ventriloquists. All my love, Steve. I wrote that without moving my lips, and he'd done a lovely little sketch of a smiley face. So
yes.
They always made me smile. So I would have that first contact with Roy by writing to him and buying his memorabilia. And then it was while I was hosting Thursford, and I heard that Roy Hudd was in the audience. You'd always hear if there was a celebrity in the crowd. Oh. And Prince William and Kate came once. Ken Dodd was there, Rick Wakeman. But when Roy was in, my eyes lit up because I knew about Roy for years being in Variety.
Oh.
And I had his books at home. I thought, I wish I'd have known I would have bought the books, but they were already signed. So in the interval, I had a tannoy call my name, and they asked me to come to the stage door area. Roy Hudd wants to meet you. My heart was beating so fast. But that was the first moment, and so it was lovely to meet you. You must have been introduced. It's just a memory loss for me that I couldn't remember who was with him, but he did stand out. He's a giant, of show business, which is why these wonderful tributes keep happening, and you're working so hard to raise the funds for this statue, which we will talk about as well. This bench statue, which doubles the price if it's a bench, but. Bless you for doing that. I'd like to talk about that very shortly. But Roy said of you, and I enjoyed his biography, Fart in a Colander, so much. He said of you, you're one of the most intelligent, ultra enthusiastic, all action, bursting with ideas, loves being in charge. And I, as a creative in the world of comedy and variety, Debbie, I have the ideas, but without Nina, I could not follow through. I could not function without Nina. And I guess they say behind every man, the rest of that.
Yes, yes. Well, the thing is, Roy and I were together for 40 years. And over that time, you get in sync with each other. And whenever Roy was writing, whether it be a show, a column for Yours magazine, whatever, he'd always bring it to me, ask me to read it through with fresh eyes. Right. And I might say, great. There was always usually a little tweak. I'd say, why don't you put that paragraph up there and move that down there? Because then it does this, that, and the other. And he was, when I first met Roy in the early days, not when I very first met him, but he'd write a show, and which one was it? He wrote a show called Beautiful Dreamer about Stephen Foster, the songwriter. He wrote Beautiful Dreamer, Queen of My Heart. He wrote that, and he had a tragic life, really. But he wrote this show, and he didn't know how to pin it. And he would always send it to somebody that he respected their opinion. And I used to say, but it's brilliant, Roy, it's brilliant. Don't send it to somebody else. But he said, no. He said, because they will see it afresh. And I respect their opinion. And so he was very modest in that way. Right. When you said, Roy was a giant, he was a big personality, but he was, in the same breath, he was humble. He was, what you saw was what you got with Roy. Yeah. Really. He never forgot his roots. And he was he couldn't bear people who were impressed by Lord so-and-so or Lady so-and-so. He said, if they're nice people, it doesn't matter if they've got a title in front of them or not. They might be not very nice.
Yes, that's amazing.
Or they might be lovely.
Yeah, you both mixed in them circles for decades with these people. So They have to be nice people. I know that is a wonderful sentiment to have, really, because he's seeing behind all that. He's seeing the people, you know, and seeing the soul of people, and you just want to surround yourself with happy people, and
yes, yeah. Well, we all start off the same, don't we? We're all just human beings, and if you treat people nice, they usually treat you nice, hopefully.
Yes. Roy has always been wonderful for paying it forward as well. I mean, in variety, comedy, musical. And when I say paying it forward, I mean looking out for younger artists like Ken Dodd always did, you know.
He was younger. He wasn't younger than Roy. I know what you mean.
Yes. No, you know, Ken would always put younger acts on the show. And Roy always did that for me. Since we met, you know, we've done so many shows together, and charity events, and you know, blue plaque events and things. And I keep seeing Arthur Lager's. Every time you have a sip of tea, I see Arthur Lager's face on camera. Sadly, there's no more mugs for sale. I can't even plug them on here.
Oh, well, this will be worth a fortune in a few years.
It will
Better not break it.
You have to have gold tea bags in it for it to be worth anything. But he really did respect keeping variety alive, didn't he?
He did. Well, the thing also was there were certain people in his coming up through the ranks who were very kind to him. And it wasn't just because of that Roy was that way inclined. I think, if you know, he was so enthusiastic about people with talent, you know, and he was very generous in his work. I remember we did many pantomimes with Jack Tripp, who used to play Dame, wonderful Dame. And Roy used to write the script, direct it, and star in it. And he'd given this, I can't remember the gag itself, but he'd given this great gag to Jack. And Jack said, oh no, he said, you're the star of the show. This is much better this should be your gag, you know. And Roy said, no, it's better if you do it because of what's there. You know, the situation, and that gag will fit in there nicely, even though Roy was on the stage with Jack at that point.
Wow, yes.
And you know, Roy could see the bigger picture. He wasn't all about pushing himself forward, I am the star. He would see the show in its entirety. Because he said, whatever, especially pantomime, he said, you've got to make it real. You know, he said, kids are coming and they want a story, and they want a story they can believe. And so he, as I say, he saw the bigger picture in things. And if a great gag was better coming from somebody else, they would have it. But it's like new talent, putting them on the bill with himself. You know, he said, I think when you've got the talent which Roy had, he's got nothing to prove, you know, and he loved to see people grow and develop, you know, new talent, whatever they might do, ventriloquism, or, you know, whether it be an actor or a singer, whatever. You know, he was just so thrilled and in love with the business, really.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so generous for him to hand over a gag that could have got him a big laugh in that moment. But
yes, yeah.
He never thought twice about that. That's the modesty.
No, he didn't. Because and that's funny enough. Later today, I'm going to a production meeting for the pantomime I'm doing. And I learned everything about pantomime from Roy. Everything I do, even my, you know, when I do my opening little chat with the cast and what have you, we introduce ourselves, we all sit around the table, we tell each other who we are and what we're playing, we meet the front of house staff and the crew, and we have a read through of the script. And Roy used to say his yardstick for pantomime, and it's what I use to this day, is if you've got a gag which you think, oh, that'll fit in great, just think to yourself, would Laurel and Hardy do it?
Oh,
that was his yardstick of how far you go, because we couldn't bear smut, you know, and it would be, didn't mind seaside postcard type humour, but no smut. So if Laurel and Hardy would do it, it might go in.
Roy would do it. That's amazing to you know, to work it all the way back then to those moments, you know, because they knew how to not go over the top, didn't they, Laurel?
Yes, and they're still funny today.
Yes, timeless
Yes.
comedy completely. Ice and Teeth. And you directed quite a few pantomimes with Roy as well. I mean, you went back to Wilton's Music Hall to do Mother Goose. He wanted to do Mother Goose again, didn't he?
He did. He'd never done he had done Mother Goose, but never as Dame.
Okay, right.
We did 2 at Wilton's. I saw that painting. It's fantastic.
Gerald Oxley, wonderful painting of Roy and Mother Goose there. So yeah, we'll
it's
find
amazing.
Yeah, we'll auction that at some point and get some money for the statue. But
I hope so, because it is quite stunning, isn't it?
It's lovely.
Yeah.
It captures that little moment in the dressing room.
And you can see it's at Wilton's, the background.
I remember celebrating Roy's 50th anniversary in show business at Wilton's.
The weekend.
Yeah, the weekend.
That was the British Musical Society's 50th.
So it was a wonderful moment. I remember bringing Archie Andrews to the event. And
yes.
Is that the one with Victoria Wood?
She opened it. That's right.
Standing in the
and Ken Dodd closed it.
Oh wow! So it was a long weekend. So
yeah, we had June Whitfield, John Major, Jules Holland. I mean, Chaz out of Chaz and Dave, who Roy loved Chaz and Dave because he said they are the modern day musical songs.
Yes,
because musical songs, they always told a story. They had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And not many do now. He used to say, you know, it's all I love you, or he's left me, or whatever. And that's it. And it just goes round and round. He said, but Chaz and Dave, like the old musical, have a beginning. They tell a story.
Yeah, wonderful.
And that's what he loved about it.
Yes. He knew the science of music and comedy, didn't he, Roy? He knew how it should flow throughout, whether it was music or it was a routine or a joke.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely, yes. And I mean, he you say about me directing him in the panto. By the first one we did at Wilton's, I only directed him twice. Yeah. And by the end of the first week, we weren't talking.
Oh, really? Oh dear.
Well, he'd always directed, you see, and we come to a scene or something, or we'd be sitting talking about something with the rest of the company, not all of them, but just odd moments in a scene. And Roy would jump in and, you know, and start directing it because
it's in here. Yeah.
It's in his heart, it's in his blood, it's oozed out of his pores. And the company were thinking, well, what do we do here? Because that's Roy Hudd, but Debbie's the director, you know. So we had a little conversation over the weekend, and we came back and all was well, you know. But and the thing was, and what I did do, and I should have done from the start, because I asked Roy from then on to take over the scenes with the comedy in, the routines and stuff like that, because he knew much more than I about what would work and what wouldn't. Right. So it worked out a nice balance.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, why have that talent there and not use it?
Yeah, definitely. A great compromise there, wasn't it, really?
Yes. We must have got on all right because we did a second year.
you went back for more.
We went back.
Oh, bless you. And it must have been wonderful for him to do it in the Wilton's Music Hall, one of the oldest music halls in London.
Absolutely. Well, it broke his heart when they didn't ask us back after 2 years. He never got over that. But yeah, I said, well, listen, Roy, we've created history. They have never, ever had a pantomime there before. You played Dame for the first time at the age of 80 in your career, or whatever it was. And I said, and it's the first time I've ever directed you. So we did the triple.
That's amazing. It's nice to have those little accolades in there, you know, even just for yourself, you know, your own heart.
But it's a wonderful place.
We did it. It was brilliant. I never knew about it until I was invited to do that show with Roy. And then I brought Archie Andrews, as I said, and it was wonderful to look around, and it was a big celebration, wasn't it? It was
That's right, yes.
Weekend.
Oh, it was a fabulous weekend.
Yes. I remember standing in the wings with Victoria Wood. It was just myself and Victoria. She was about to go on I just acknowledged her. I said hello, but I didn't want to break her because she looked like she was learning lines, and she had like 10 minutes speech. But I was looking at Victoria Wood to my right. I looked on the stage. Roy Hudd was there with Wing Calvin. I knew Ken Dodd was coming up. I knew, and as a young variety actor, I was in, it was right up my street.
You're not in bad company.
That's the word. It was wonderful company and great memories. I'll never forget that weekend. It was brilliant. And as a water rat, I'm proudly wearing my emblem because of Roy. Roy proposed me. We met again at the City Varieties Music Hall.
Yes.
Watched him do his Max Miller tribute wonderfully. And he got them all going. He's one of the originals of the good old days at City Varieties.
Yes.
They'd all dress up. And when Roy was there, it was like it was, back in the 60s. It was like,
yes. Well, the funny thing with you say, oh, look what I've got here.
Oh, there's little Max Miller.
A little Max Miller, which somebody made, Roy, years and years and years ago. But yes, when the Max Miller spot, Roy, and I think this is the same, this is how Roy's brain worked. He said there was probably only about one original Max Miller gags in that spot, which was a 15-minute spot.
Oh, wow.
He said, and if you hear gags of today and you think I can Millerize that, because you don't want to do all the original material because the majority of it is dated. But that's how he did his career as well. He would always move forward and look forward, like with the younger performers. He never got stale. He sort of said, I can't do that gag anymore. It's too old hat, Right. And I think that's why he kept up there as well.
Definitely. And that's obviously the experience with the Hudlines as well. It was so topical, wasn't it? And they were writing every week for the Hudlines for 40 years.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, they did 10 weeks in the spring and they did 10 weeks in the autumn, and usually a Christmas special. Yeah, sometimes when Roy was doing the opening monologue, they'd run on and give him another bit of paper to read and he'd put it on the end and stuff. Yeah.
Wow. And that's what Spitting Image done as well. And I know Chris Emmett, who worked on Hudlines, of course, worked on Spitting Image, and they were used to adding on the day during rehearsal.
Yes.
Skits and sketches. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, that's what they did with the Hudlines. On the Thursday, they went in at 10 o'clock, rehearsed the script and recorded it at 1 o'clock.
Wow, that quick turnaround.
They didn't, and it went out Thursday night and repeated on Saturday afternoon. But they didn't see the script until the Thursday morning, 10 o'clock.
Oh, that's terrifying, isn't it? Imagine going into panto like that. Did Roy ever drop any I've got a new joke, I've got a new routine we'll put in even during rehearsals in panto?
Oh yes, yeah, if it fitted.
Okay.
It's like a song. I mean, I sometimes have this argument, not so much these days, if I'm doing a panto and they put in a number, say, a song, and I say, but it doesn't, there's nothing to do with the scene. And I said, I don't care if it's Beethoven or Beyonce. If it fits the scene and it's part of the story, great. I don't care, and it has to be part of it. And Roy was the same. He sometimes hears something topical in the news when we're in the middle of a run, and he'd work out something to slot in, and something may happen in the news. And yeah, definitely keeps it fresh. And he loved winging it, Roy. And that's when, I used to say, Roy, you're at your best off the top of the head.
Oh, that's amazing. It's scary for a director when you want your script to be.
Well, it depends. As long as you don't do it all the way through and it's just now and again, that's fine. Yeah. But you also have to have faith in the person who's doing it. If it's somebody who can't pull it off, you have a word. But if it's somebody like Roy, who would know, I've got a great gag, but it's not quite right, would leave it alone. Okay. He had great judgment on things like that.
Brilliant. He must have had a mind of an encyclopedia of comedy, like 20 jokes for every subject, probably.
I know. Well, when I was away directing, it's the only time Roy and I were ever really away from each other, was just those like 10 days, 10, 11 days when I was directing a pantomime. And the first, I can remember I would ring Roy and say, Roy, we need an extra verse on the end of this because we can't do the scene change in time. I'll ring you later, and he'd write me another verse. Or what do I do about this, Roy? And instantly, he was so creative and inventive. He said, what you want to do is bar, 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 bar. And it was done. I thought, thank you, Roy.
Really, it just needed that rhyme to be completed, really, didn't it? I guess.
Yes, yeah.
Just to make it flow. That's wonderful. And I read in the book as well that Fire in the Colander about your surprise. You were great at surprising Roy on his birthdays, weren't you? I mean,
only the big birthdays, yes.
Yeah, the big ones, and it was wonderful. You used venues that meant a lot to his heart. Prince of Wales Theatre, Brick Lane Music Hall. I love the stories of how you got him there. It's so nice.
Yes. Yeah, the Prince of Wales Theatre in the West End, I did that one for Roy's 50th, and I did that because he had done Underneath the Arches there for over a year, and he won the Olivier Award for that. So that was close to his heart, that theatre. And there was two great actors, Frank Middlemas and Geoffrey Toone, who were wonderful friends of ours. And it was Roy's birthday coming up, and they said, well, we'd like to take you out for supper to celebrate your birthday. He said, we've got this marvellous restaurant we found in the West End. And it was on a Sunday evening. So we said, oh, lovely, thank you. So we drive up to London, we park the car, and we're walking past the outside of the Prince of Wales. And there's Mike Shepherd, who was the stage manager there. The canopy, which was over the entrance, it's changed now. He was changing light bulbs and up a ladder. And Roy said, all right, Mike. Hello, Roy, what are you doing? And he said, going for my birthday, birthday dinner. Oh, lovely. He said, oh, some of those posters you gave us, again, Roy, anything to do with the theatre, he would give them. Oh, and he said, we put them up in the bar. Do you want to come and have a look? And Geoffrey and Frank sort of looked, well, we've only got 5 minutes, And he said, well, it'll only take a couple of minutes, please, And he said, oh, all right then. So we went downstairs into the Stalls bar, and there was his friends and family. There was about 100 people there, and it was fabulous. So, and he knew nothing about it. So that was one of them, yeah.
Oh, that is wonderful. Nina did the same for me for my 40th, and there was, it was just wonderful. There was water rats there, but people there from summer seasons, pantomimes.
Fantastic.
I had no idea. It terrified me when I walked in because I don't like the attention. Being what I am is strange, but I don't like being the center.
It's different on stage.
It is, isn't it? With that spotlight when I'm nowhere near, but when there's 100 people staring at you like that.
I know, yeah. Well, there was one when I hired a London double-decker bus for Roy's birthday, and I kept going to the station, the bus station, to go through where the tour was going to go, because I did it through the East End.
Okay.
And they said to me, do you want a guide on the bus? I said, you are joking. I've got Roy Hudd. I said, he'll be saying, but Flanagan lived down that road. So and so lived over there.
Can you imagine the Roy Hudd London tour guide? That would be incredible, wouldn't it? Just down all the music hall lanes. We should get someone to do that. That's brilliant.
Well, it was funny because they were building the Globe Theatre at that time, and it wasn't open, it wasn't complete. But at the last minute, we had about 25 friends on this double-decker bus. And at the last, I booked to go to Wilton's and have a tour of Wilton's, which again wasn't open at that point. And then I booked lunch for us all at the Prospect of Whitby, which is where one of I think it was the hanging judge used to eat there. Anyway, the Globe Theatre, I suddenly thought, oh, we passed there. I'll ring up and see if we can have a little tour of that. And so I rang up and I thought, I'll use Roy's name. And the the lady was American. She didn't know who Roy was, but she said, yes, so I had to pay, I don't know, a tenner for each person. And we went in there, and I can actually say, I think Roy was the first person ever to perform on that stage, because we had to wear hard hats. And Roy went up there onto the stage and did a Billy Bennett monologue.
Oh, did he? Oh, that's amazing. What an accolade as well.
Yeah.
At the Globe Theatre.
At the Globe Theatre, yes. Yeah.
Did you get pictures of that, or was that not allowed?
I think I have a picture, yeah, somewhere. Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
oh, isn't that lovely? Now, Debbie, I know time is very precious because you've got a production meeting today, but if we could talk about this wonderful tribute that you're doing. We're raising funds for a statue, and it's going to be at the Theatre Royal, Bury St Edmunds, which we did a 200-year celebration, didn't we? And so did they welcome that idea straight away, or was that difficult?
Instantly.
Oh, that's
Instantly.
lovely.
Yeah,
No.
This is where we're hoping for it to be. They're in negotiation at the moment because it is a listed building.
Okay.
Because it's like a Georgian theatre.
Beautiful.
And but the whole town seemed to be on our side for it. Yes, that show was quite something, because Roy was in the middle of a tour when they asked me if I would put the show together, and I said, love to. And the first thing I said, well, I'll get Roy to host it. And he didn't know that at the time. And I came home and I told him, and he said, I'm in the middle of a tour. Oh. I said, yeah, but I've checked it, Roy. The week before you're in Cambridge, which we're going to commute to home because it's only not far away. I said, in the next week, we're dark, we haven't got a show. So you can relax the following week. So, all right. And he loved it. He took over again.
Yeah, and it was wonderful. Such great
but no, they did. I rang Emma Suckling, who is like in charge of events and stuff which happens at the theatre, and I said to her, I want to do a statue of Roy sitting on a bench, and I said I was wondering if the theatre would like the idea of it being outside your theatre, and she said, we'd love that. Oh. And then she had to go and ask the artistic director and everybody instantly said,
unanimous.
Fabulous. We got to go through these hoops and get these boxes ticked by the powers that be. But so hopefully, yes.
Wonderful. Bless you for that. And the Sondheim Theatre hosted this wonderful night. Can you tell us how that went? And was it your dream? Did it go how you wanted it to go?
It went better than I wanted it to go, because I'm always looking for fundraisers because every penny counts, whether it's a £5 or 5,000, Yes. And if anybody wants to give 5,000, they're more than welcome. But yes, and I rang Mags, who was one of the producers on the Hudlines, and I said, what about putting a News Hudlines show on, and using Chris Emmett, who was with it all the time, Alison Steadman, who was in it for a few years, Nicola McAuliffe, and he said, oh, I think it's a great idea, leave it with me. Anyway, about a week later, he came back and he said, talk to some of the other producers, and we said, because Roy's not here, we'd still like Roy on that centre mic, because he used to always be on the centre mic, Chris on his right, and June or Alison, whoever the girl was, on his left. He said, so we like Roy to be centre stage. He said, why don't we do the Roy Hudlines? And all the sketches were about Roy and his passions and his loves and his hates. So and he said, what about John Coleshaw to stand in for Roy? Because he was I've never met John at this point. And I just thought it was amazing. And Dirk was a rock. He more or less organised it all. He was fantastic. And so Cameron, I was looking for a venue and different ones, they weren't happening because they were booked or this, that or the other. Anyway, I was in negotiation, chatting to the people at Sir Cameron's, the Sondheim Theatre. And this was all going on and, oh, we'll get back to you about this. We'll get this price to you and that and what have you. And I rang Ian Talbot, who used to run the open air theatre in Regent's Park, because Roy worked there a few times. And I told him what I was doing. I said, I'm ringing you in. I said, because if this doesn't come off, can you think of anywhere else, or have you got contacts with anybody? And he said, well, you're trying, Cameron. He said, I know Billy. I said, I've sent an email to this William. He said, Billy used to work for me at Regent's Park. He said, I'll have a word with him. So he rang him up and he said, I think this project ought to be shown to Cameron. And he said, yeah, okay. He said, I mean, really put in front of his face and let him see it.
Wow.
And Billy did.
Brilliant.
And so Cameron was incredible. He gave us the theatre for nothing. He didn't charge us for his staff. I hired a screen because we showed some film of Roy, just a 10-minute slot of work he'd done throughout the years. He paid for everything.
Oh.
And I to this day, I am still bowled over with that. But it just shows what high esteem Sir Cameron held Roy in, and that was his.
Meant to people, yeah.
It was incredible, so generous. So I don't think I could have afforded to do it if we'd have had to pay all the extras.
No, of course it's about raising the funds, is it? Eyes and Teeth. I think it's time to have a break, so there's going to be part 2 of this special to Roy Hudd. There's so many more clips and tributes to come. God knows how long the Ken Dodd special's going to be. Today's quote comes from Max Miller. My wife's father said, if you marry my daughter, I'll give you 3 acres and a cow. I'm still waiting for the 3 acres. Roy Hudd paid such a wonderful tribute to Max Miller, and we worked at least 3 occasions where he performed it at the Westcliff Theatre in Clacton. He did it at Leeds City Varieties, and he did it at the Bury St Edmunds Theatre Royal for the 200-year tribute. He adored Max so much, but we adored Roy so much too. And that's why we're all here today paying tribute to such a wonderful man. I miss him as a friend, and I was so proud to call him a friend. He was always there for a chat backstage. He gave you his time, and that's the best thing someone could give a younger performer. Thank you for listening to Roy Hudd OBE, the specials on Eyes and Teeth. This is just part 1. We'll see you in part 2. Additional clips from YouTube. Father Painted the Parlour. Seaside Special with Roy Hudd. Thank you to Robert Pearce, John Fisher, The Alan Titchmarsh Show, talking about Cary Grant with Roy Hudd. Very, very special thanks to Debbie Hudd, talking about her memories of Roy. Thanks to Roy for delivering great entertainment over the years, including Albert and the Lion, Underneath the Arches, George Formby, Max Miller. And thanks to Mike Craig. We miss you and your stories too, Mike. Eyes and Teeth is written, produced and hosted by Steve Hewlett, vocals by Lola, Larissa and Nina Hewlett. The Eyes and Teeth music and jingles are produced and performed by Kevin Dean. Join me on the next edition of Eyes and Teeth, the specials, where we revisit the career and tributes to the wonderful Roy Hudd OBE. See you in episode 2.